Hold up. If you walk into Avengers Doomsday without watching the right Marvel projects first, you might miss some of the biggest moments. Because this isn't just another Avengers movie. Marvel is bringing together heroes from completely different corners of its universe. The Fantastic Four, the Thunderbolts, the X-Men, Deadpool, familiar Avengers, and potentially characters from realities that shouldn't even exist together. And here's the problem. The MCU now has more than 50 movies, live action and animated series, and specials. That's an insane amount of content. But you don't need to watch all of it. There is a much smarter way. There's a short list of 10 essential titles that gives you the most important story pieces, and one movie in particular is being positioned as the biggest direct setup for Doomsday. But here's where things get interesting. A few of the movies you might expect to be essential aren't actually on that final 10. So today, we're cutting through all the noise. I'll show you what matters, what you can skip, what you should watch if you have extra time, and the one movie you absolutely should not ignore before Avengers Doomsday. Let's get into it. Let's begin where it all started. The MCU began with one man, Tony Stark, a billionaire, a genius, a weapons manufacturer, and a man who thought he understood the world, until he was kidnapped, trapped in a cave, and forced to build something that would change superhero cinema forever, Iron Man. But strangely, most analysts would recommend a foundation that doesn't begin with Tony. It would possibly begin with Steve Rogers, Captain America, the first Avenger. And there's a reason. Before the Avengers became Earth's greatest heroes, there was a super soldier fighting during World War II. Steve Rogers starts as a physically weak kid with an incredibly strong sense of right and wrong. Then comes the super soldier serum, and everything changes. But Steve isn't just important because he's Captain America. He's important because his story becomes one of the MCU's biggest symbols of leadership, sacrifice, and legacy. Then comes another piece that seems disconnected at first, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, a pilot who becomes one of the most powerful heroes in the MCU. Her story also introduces the Kree, the Skrulls, and a much larger cosmic side of Marvel. And then, Tony Stark enters the picture. Iron Man. Tony builds his first suit while imprisoned. He returns home, and instead of continuing exactly as before, he becomes Iron Man. That decision changes everything. Then comes Iron Man 2, and this is where Natasha Romanoff appears for the first time, Black Widow. At the time, nobody knew how important she would become. But years later, Natasha would become one of the founding members of the Avengers. Then there's the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, gamma radiation, an uncontrollable alter ego, and a hero constantly trying to keep his anger under control. Then, Thor. A god gets banished to Earth. He loses his power, and discovers that being worthy isn't about strength, it's about character. And finally, the 7-piece puzzle comes together. The Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Loki standing against them. New York becomes a battlefield, the Avengers become a team, and Marvel proves something important. Individual heroes are impressive, but together, they're something else. And that's exactly why Doomsday matters, because Marvel is about to do something much bigger than simply reunite the Avengers. It's bringing together different generations and different corners of Marvel. But before we reach that, the MCU had to expand, and it expanded fast. The MCU gets much bigger. After the Avengers, Tony Stark isn't the same. Iron Man 3 explores the aftermath of the Battle of New York. Tony is dealing with trauma, an important detail because Marvel begins showing that saving the world doesn't mean heroes walk away emotionally untouched. Then, Thor, the Dark World, the Ether, the Dark Elves, and another Infinity Stone enters the story. At the time, it just looked like another Marvel adventure. Years later, we'd realize these objects were pieces of a much larger plan. Then comes one of the most important MCU movies for understanding the Avengers' future, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. Trust collapses. The organization protecting the world is compromised from within. And Steve discovers that his old friend Bucky Barnes is still alive. This movie changes Steve. It changes Bucky. And eventually, it changes the Avengers. Then Marvel goes cosmic. Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, Groot, 5 complete misfits, and somehow they become a family. Then, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 digs even deeper into that family. Peter meets ego, Rocket struggles with his own identity, and the Guardians become much more than a comedy team. Then comes Avengers Age of Ultron. Tony Stark creates an artificial intelligence intended to protect Earth. Instead, Ultron decides humanity itself is the problem. Sound familiar? Marvel begins planting another recurring idea. What happens when someone believes they know what's best for everyone else? That's going to become extremely important when we eventually get to Doctor Doom, but we're not there yet. First, Marvel introduces another hero who will become very important to the future, Ant-Man. Scott Lang gets his suit, learns how to use it, and eventually becomes part of something much bigger. Then, everything explodes. Now, Civil War changes everything. Captain America: Civil War. This isn't really a normal Captain America movie. It's an Avengers movie disguised as one. The team is divided. Tony Stark supports government oversight. Steve Rogers doesn't trust the system enough to surrender that control. And suddenly, the heroes who fought side by side are fighting each other. But there's another huge moment. A teenage Peter Parker arrives. Spider-Man. Tom Holland's Peter enters the MCU, and suddenly, the future is standing in front of Tony Stark. Then we meet T'Challa, Black Panther, Wakanda, Vibranium, and another future pillar of Marvel is introduced. But Civil War isn't important just because of who appears. It's important because the Avengers break, and that broken relationship matters when Thanos arrives. Then comes Black Widow, which gives Natasha her own story and expands her past. Black Panther introduces Wakanda as one of Earth's most technologically advanced nations. Spider-Man: Homecoming shows Peter trying to balance school with being a superhero. And Doctor Strange introduces something that will become absolutely critical later: magic. Stephen Strange begins as a brilliant surgeon. Then an accident destroys his career. He searches for a way to heal himself. Instead, he discovers an entirely different reality: mystical forces, other dimensions, and eventually, the multiverse. At this point, Marvel is quietly assembling the ingredients: science, magic, space, technology, different worlds, different dimensions, and heroes who don't even know what's coming. Then, Thor returns. But this time, a lot more changes. We see Ragnarok and the beginning of the end. Thor: Ragnarok. Thor loses Mjolnir. Asgard is destroyed. Hulk returns. Loki is forced to confront his complicated relationship with Thor. And perhaps most importantly, Thor realizes that Asgard isn't simply a place. It's the people. The kingdom can fall, and the people can survive. That lesson becomes incredibly important, because shortly after, the biggest villain in the MCU finally makes his move. Avengers: Infinity War. Thanos doesn't need an army to terrify the Avengers. He needs 6 objects, the Infinity Stones. One by one, he collects them. And suddenly, everything Marvel built toward is converging. Guardians, Avengers, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, everyone. They fight, they lose, and then the snap. Half of all life disappears. Silence, dust, shock. And Marvel ends the movie with the heroes losing. But that wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the final chapter. And now, Endgame. Avengers: Endgame. The survivors are broken. 5 years pass. The world is changed, but the Avengers refuse to accept defeat. They travel through time. They revisit moments from the past. And eventually, they face Thanos again. Then comes the battle. Portals open. The fallen heroes return. Steve Rogers lifts Mjolnir. The entire MCU seems to explode onto one battlefield, and Tony Stark makes the ultimate sacrifice. I am Iron Man. The Infinity Saga ends, but here's the part that matters now. Marvel didn't just end a story, it removed the original Avengers from the center of the universe. Tony is gone, Natasha is gone, Steve is no longer Captain America, and the MCU has to find its next generation. Then comes Spider-Man: Far From Home. Peter is trying to live a normal life after losing Tony, but the world expects him to step up. And that becomes the beginning of another huge Marvel storyline, because the next threat isn't just another villain, it's reality itself. The multiverse. This is where your Doomsday preparation becomes much more serious. WandaVision. Wanda has lost almost everything, and grief becomes powerful enough to reshape reality. She creates Westview, a perfect sitcom world, a perfect family, a perfect vision, until reality catches up with her. This story matters because Wanda's powers are no longer simply about energy blasts. She's affecting reality itself. Then, Loki. And this might be one of the most important pieces of the entire puzzle. The TVA. Variants. The sacred timeline. Alternate realities. Loki discovers that the multiverse isn't simply a collection of fun alternate worlds. It can become dangerous. Very dangerous. Then comes Spider-Man No Way Home. Peter wants everyone to forget his identity. Doctor Strange tries to help. The spell goes wrong. And suddenly, characters from other Spider-Man universes begin appearing. 3 Spider-Men, multiple villains, multiple realities. The multiverse is no longer a theory, it's here. Then, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And this is where audiences hear a word that could become extremely important to Doomsday. Incursions. 2 realities can collide, and when they do, one or both may be destroyed. Think about that. Not a city, not a planet, an entire reality. That changes the meaning of a superhero battle. Then, What If takes the idea even further. Different choices, different realities, different versions of familiar heroes. Marvel is basically telling us anything can happen. And then, Deadpool and Wolverine break the wall. Deadpool and Wolverine does something extremely important. It brings Marvel's Fox history directly into the multiverse story. Deadpool, Wolverine, legacy Marvel characters, different universes, different histories. The walls separating Marvel's worlds become thinner than ever. And that's exactly why the arrival of the X-Men suddenly feels much more possible. Then there's X-Men 97, an animated series, but an extremely important one for fans interested in the mutant side of Marvel. It reminds audiences just how powerful, how emotional, and how politically complicated the X-Men can be. Now, look at what Marvel has assembled. Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Deadpool, Wolverine, Thunderbolts, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Loki, Wakanda, and countless other heroes. This isn't simply an Avengers team, it's an entire Marvel ecosystem. But if you're wondering which newer characters you need to know, that's where the next phase comes in. The new generation. Sam Wilson, Kamala Khan, Kate Bishop, Shang-Chi, Yelena, Shuri. The new generation isn't coming, they're already here. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier establishes Sam Wilson's journey toward becoming Captain America. Hawkeye introduces Kate Bishop. Ms. Marvel introduces Kamala Khan. Moon Knight expands the supernatural side. She-Hulk brings Jennifer Walters into the MCU. Echo and Daredevil, Born Again, reconnect the MCU with its darker street-level world. Then we get Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, a mysterious set of weapons, a powerful family, and a hero whose future clearly extends beyond his first movie. Eternals introduces ancient beings who have been secretly watching humanity for thousands of years. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, continues Wakanda's story after the death of T'Challa. The Marvels connects Carol Danvers, Kamala Khan, and Monica Rambeau. Captain America, Brave New World, gives Sam his first major theatrical test as Captain America. And then, Thunderbolts. A group of anti-heroes and morally complicated characters are thrown together. Not exactly the Avengers, but potentially part of Marvel's new generation of super teams. And then, we reach the movie that changes everything. The Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four, First Steps. This is because the Fantastic Four aren't simply another superhero team. They're Marvel's first family. And Reed Richards has a history with one particular man, Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom. That's why this movie could matter so much. It's introducing an entirely new corner of Marvel, right before Doomsday. And if Doom is truly at the center of the next Avengers story, then understanding Reed Richards may become just as important as understanding the villain himself. But here's something fascinating. You don't necessarily have to watch every Marvel project to understand that. You can reduce this enormous franchise to just 10 essential titles. And that list is where everything gets really interesting. If you don't have time for 50+ movies and shows, don't panic. Here's how to go over it quicker. Number 1, The Avengers, because this is where the original team comes together. Number 2, Captain America: Civil War, because the Avengers fracture and Spider-Man enters the MCU. Number 3, Avengers: Infinity War, because Thanos begins his final attack. Number 4, Avengers: Endgame, because the Infinity Saga ends. Number 5, Loki, Seasons 1 and 2, because the TVA and multiverse become central. Number 6, WandaVision, because Wanda's story becomes deeply connected to reality itself. Number 7, Spider-Man: No Way Home, because the multiverse becomes impossible to ignore. Number 8, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because incursions become a terrifying possibility. Number 9, Deadpool and Wolverine, because Marvel's Fox universe crashes directly into the multiverse story. And number 10, Fantastic Four: First Steps, because it's expected to be the biggest direct setup for Avengers Doomsday. 10 titles, that's your shortcut. But there's one more category worth knowing about, the optional but important Marvel stories, which includes Daredevil Seasons 1 to 3, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, and The Punisher. If you have the time, watch them, especially Daredevil, because Marvel's street-level universe has become much more important again. But if you're watching purely to prepare for Doomsday, you don't need to spend weeks catching up on every single series. That's the beauty of the 10-title list. And now, look at what happens when you connect everything. The original Avengers gave Marvel its foundation. Civil War broke the team apart. Infinity War destroyed half the universe. Endgame ended an era. Loki opened the multiverse. WandaVision showed what happens when grief can reshape reality. No Way Home proved universes can collide. Multiverse of Madness introduced incursions. Deadpool and Wolverine opened the door to Marvel's legacy universes. And Fantastic Four: First Steps brings Marvel's first family into position. Then, Doctor Doom arrives. That's not random, that's a progression. And it leads to the biggest question of all. What happens when all these worlds finally collide? Because Avengers Doomsday isn't just about stopping a villain, it's about stopping something potentially much bigger. A collapse of realities, a collision of heroes, a battle between different versions of Marvel's history, and possibly the beginning of an entirely new MCU. So if you're preparing for Avengers Doomsday, you have two choices. You can spend months watching everything, every movie, every series, every special, every animated project. Or you can take the smarter route. Start with the 10 essential titles. Watch them carefully. Pay attention to the multiverse. Pay attention to the characters. Pay attention to the relationships. Because when Doomsday finally brings these worlds together, those details could make the difference between simply watching the movie and actually understanding what you're watching. And remember, Marvel's official story is one thing, fan theories are another. So don't believe every rumor you see online, but when you start seeing the same pieces appear again and again, that's when things get interesting. Because Marvel has spent years building this universe, and now it looks like all those roads are finally leading to one place, Avengers Doomsday. So tell me, have you already watched all 10 essential titles? Or are you starting your MCU marathon right now? And here's the question I really want answered. If you could only watch one Marvel movie before Doomsday, which one would you choose? Infinity War? Endgame? No Way Home? Loki? Or Fantastic Four: First Steps? Drop your answer below, even if I failed to mention. I would like to know your preference MCU movie option. Hit like if you're getting ready for Doomsday. Subscribe and turn on notification because we're going deeper into every trailer, every confirmed detail, every theory surrounding Marvel's next massive crossover. And if you've not already watched the trailer breakdown, go watch that next. Because after seeing how all these stories connect, you may never look at the Doomsday trailer the same way again. The countdown has begun, and this time, Marvel isn't just bringing the Avengers back, it's bringing the entire universe with them. Thanks for watching.